In 1998, as Raccoon City was all but decimated by a missile, one man sought an escape from the hellfire: Hunk. Hunk would fight his way through the sewers of the city, up through the RPD, and ultimately be saved in the nick of time by Nighthawk. But all wasn't well. In the Prime universe, Hunk would continue working for the USS, but in our universe, things went a bit differently. The death, the lack of security, the misery, it all got too much for Hunk. He'd go underground following the Raccoon City incident and drop off the radar for years. Until one day he'd find Chris Redfield, survivor of the infamous Spencer Mansion incident, and by this point a seasoned BOW hunter and killer. Hunk approached Chris with an offer, his services in exchange for a job, some kind of purpose, and a second chance. Chris understood the value of a second chance and knew that his new team, the Hound Wolf Squad, could make use of a man of Hunk's talents. They didn't call him the Grim Reaper for nothing. Chris would explain that Hunk's first mission would be a trip to Central Europe to scout out and soften up 5 targets. 5 masterminds working together to create a bioweapon so volatile and so utterly terrifying it could change the balance of the world order. Salvatore Moreau, Carl Heisenberg, Donna Beneviento, Alcina Dimitrescu, and their leader, Mother Miranda. All 5 of these targets have been infected with the Mega Mycete, the catalyst for this new breed of bioweapon. Hunk would be airdropped into the village with very specific instructions. Scout out the village and take out as many of Mother Miranda's underlings as he could, and make sure everything was set for Chris and the Hound Wolf Squad to clean house when they eventually arrived. But, well, things didn't go to plan. Upon arriving outside of the gates of the castle towering over the village, Hunk would be contacted by Chris. His orders were as follows. He was not able to, under any circumstance, pick up enemy weaponry. He was not allowed to converse or otherwise trade with any local merchants. The only ammunition, aside from what he was given, could be obtained only in the most dire of circumstances. Unless he could somehow craft handgun ammunition, anything else would probably be too risky to use. All of the village's big hitters would need to be disposed of in one way or another. This included the underlings, the giants who roamed this land, who weren't in Mother Miranda's favour. Finally, Hunk will only be allowed to use guns he was familiar with and had used before, and more importantly, had been approved by Chris. His trusty MP5, a grenade launcher, a pistol, and grenades. This is all he'd be allowed to use, this was his familiar kit, and this is what he'd have to make do with. The following report details Agent Hunk's infiltration and subsequent engagement within Castle Dimitrescu. The objective was the elimination of primary target Alcina Dimitrescu and associated hostile entities encountered during Operation Execution. Upon entry into the structure, Agent Hunk proceeded through interior corridors, uncovering multiple hostile threats embedded with the environment. Intelligence confirmed the presence of 3 secondary targets. Prior to engagement, Agent Hunk was captured and transported to the primary target, Alcina. Following a temporary confinement scenario, all hostiles vacated the chamber, enabling Hunk to escape captivity without expenditure of resources. Agent Hunk located a central hall containing 4 statues with missing mask components. Assessment concluded that recovery and placement of 4 masks was required to find safe passage from the structure. Engagement with all secondary targets was deemed necessary for progression. Agent Hunk advanced into the lower castle levels. The initial hostile group encountered was neutralised with minimal resistance. The threat level assessed as low. Targets eliminated efficiently and without notable resource usage. First secondary target identified as Bella, former castle staff altered via experimentation conducted under Mother Miranda. Targets demonstrated the ability to disperse into swarms of insects. Weakness identified. Exposure to low temperatures. Agent Hunk breached a window to introduce cold external air, destabilising target form. Bella was neutralised with minimal ammunition use. Resource status remained optimal. Hunk progressed into the wine cellar, encountering multiple hostile entities. Engagement strategy included both evasion and direct elimination. All threats were bypassed or neutralised efficiently. Agent Hunk encountered Alcina Dimitrescu and was forcibly displaced through the castle floor into a lower level. The target exhibited high physical strength. Hunk evaded further confrontation through manoeuvring and environmental awareness. No significant resource usage recorded. Second secondary target, Daniela, engaged within the library sector. Hunk replicated prior strategy, exposing target to cold air via skylight breach. Target neutralised using minimal ammunition. Following second elimination, the primary target initiated active pursuit. Hunk successfully evaded Dimitrescu within castle corridors while continuing objective completion. Final mask located and secured. Final secondary target was engaged in attic space, and due to lack of natural exposure point, Agent Hunk created a structural breach using explosives, generating airflow sufficient to destabilise the target. Cassandra was neutralised with limited ammunition expenditure. Hunk exited the castle structure but was intercepted by the primary target at an elevated exterior position. Target underwent extreme mutation after being stabbed with magical knife, forming a large dragon-like entity likely linked to the Megamycete. Engagement required near total expenditure of Agent Hunk's remaining resources. Notably effective weapons were the grenade launcher flash rounds, indicating target sensitivity to both light and sound. After prolonged combat though, Agent Hunk delivered the final blow via shotgun, resulting in target crystallization and ultimate termination. End of case file. So with one Lord down and 3 still to go, Hunk's first Lord encounter was very resource intensive, whereas his next one would be very mentally taxing. That isn't to say though that it would be easy on the resources, as getting there would be a pain. However, when the Grim Reaper entered House Beneviento, something shifted. So I'll let him tell you in his own words from his report exactly what went down in that fateful house. After escaping the first target and her 3 servants, I headed into the village but was cornered by some werewolf-like bioweapons. After managing to escape onto the rooftops of the village and finding my way out of the maze that was the central village, I headed towards the nearest gate and found myself in a forest. Things got weird. Weirder than Raccoon. The air was thick with fog. Crows circled me like I was a dead man walking. Ironic, really. Worst of all, these dolls. They hung from the trees like victims of the gallows. It was unnerving, but nothing I hadn't dealt with before. Eventually a house became clear on the edge of a cliffside. It was perched akin to the crows that lurked in the forest, so I knew that must have been where the second target, Donna Beneviento, would be. From what Chris had told me about Donna, she was a tragic case of loss. Her parents committed suicide early on and she'd begin communicating with people through her doll, Angie. Little did I know, Angie would soon become a bigger issue than I'd give her credit for. An elevator took me down to the bottom of the house, but it was different. It had an air of unease about it. Upstairs felt like a regular old house, but down here, well, this wasn't an average basement. The only saving grace was that this basement didn't have an underground lab attached to it. To be completely honest, the whole thing reeked of a setup. It was too damned easy to get down here and my senses were right. The lights went out and when they came back on, my weapons were just gone. In the middle of the room lay a mannequin, clearly some demented puzzle set out by Donna. Something I needed to solve to get out of that hellhole, and well, that was easier said than done. What I didn't account for was that my fear, the underlying feeling of inadequacy, something I hadn't felt in years, was now being brought to the forefront of my mind thanks to Donna's powers, and the manifestation of loss. All those lives I'd destroyed or seen destroyed by others had finally caught up to me in the form of a baby, a symbol of purity now turned into an awful, awful abomination. The baby proved to be a challenge, but nothing I couldn't get past with a little patience. This led me back up to the surface where Donna had stepped her game up, meaning I'd have to step mine up, and with no weaponry at my disposal, it left me only one choice: to get a bit creative. Donna was leading me on a wild goose chase, toying with me as I had toyed with the idea of just rolling over and giving up. But no, this wasn't me talking, it was the fear, and I don't fear what I understand, and I understood Donna Beneviento maybe better than anyone. She was nothing more than a lonely girl playing with dolls, and it only took a pair of scissors and some applied force to bring her reign to an end, bringing her to her knees and ultimately killing her, and with it, her little collection of dolls. Donna's story was brought to an end swiftly enough, allowing me safe passage out of the house, and with my weapons being returned to my side, I knew the final targets on my list would be no easier. The only thing I prayed was that they were less of a mental pain. With Donna Beneviento taken care of, Hunk would leave the house having used barely any resources, only using a handful on foes who tried to stop him from getting there. The next lord of the village he'd have to dispose of though, well, I wouldn't say he's weird, but there's definitely something a little fishy about him. Salvatore Moreau, the big fish in the bigger pond. And this guy is an absolute mess. I mean, look at him. What even is that? He also lives like a Reddit mod. Look at his quarters. Oh my god. Anyway, Hunk's next target was this thing, and to get him into his final fishy form to kill him, Hunk would have to rage bait him into becoming the big fish. However, this would be easier said than done, but still easier than Moreau putting shoes on, considering he hasn't seen his own feet in 25 years. After first meeting this slob, Hunk tries to escape the goon cave, but is stopped by this. What the hell is this? Anyway, after escaping the cave and grabbing the key for the boat, we finally get to face Moreau, mano a fisho. That wasn't as cool as I thought it would sound. The first part of this fight was easy enough. It's a glorified puzzle section that even this dumb motherfucker could solve. But that's not where this gets interesting. Where it gets interesting is in the second part, where Moreau, well, he tries to get a little bit more down and personal. Hunk had limited resources, but as per the rules, he was allowed to forage during boss fight encounters. So he found a few shells, a few grenades, a few mines, you know, the stuff you usually find lying around in Eastern European villages, and the fight continued on. The fight more or less boiled down to simply outmaneuvering this overgrown piece of cod, and you know what? It was still kind of tricky. We actually died. A couple of times. It was kind of embarrassing. Yep, after all my trash talking on Moreau, turns out he wasn't going to take it lying down, and he actually fought back pretty aggressively, leading Hunk to die twice. However, fear not, dear viewer, because in the same way you should hit the like button because it does help out a lot and lets me know you enjoy these videos, Hunk hits Moreau with enough shotgun shells to stage a terrorist attack, and also enough mines to stage a terrorist attack. And just like that, Moreau was put out of his chuddy little existence. We even headed back to his goon cave to laugh at how sad his final days were. Look at this! Who lives like this? Who lives like this? Nobody lives like this! But before we could head back to taking this challenge run a little bit more seriously, we had one more wolf-shaped problem to get to. But don't worry, kitten. Oh god. But before we could head back to taking this challenge run a little bit more seriously, we had one more wolf-shaped creature to take care of. But don't worry, kittens, Daddy's the alpha around here. I actually wrote that in the script as well. The top there. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but like there. But before we could head back to making this challenge run feel a little bit more serious, we had one more wolf-shaped foe to take care of. But don't worry, kittens, I'm the alpha around these parts. Oh my god, that was... I'm not kidding, that was like the 7th take I've done of that because I couldn't stop laughing every time. We killed the first underling boss of this run really easily. Like, I thought this guy would put up much more of a fight, and he just didn't. So, with that out of the way, let's jump forward about an hour and a half and see what Hunk's getting up to then. We catch back up with Mr. Reaper running low on resources and even lower on self-belief, running around a giant factory making robot-human hybrids for the sole purpose of killing Mother Miranda. Yes, that's right, Heisenberg, the final target on Hunk's list before getting to the main woman, is actively aiming to take her out for us, but we can't accept this help because Hunk needs to take him down. The key we needed to find in this factory was eluding Hunk, causing some serious mental pain to the lone operative in the village. Loops of the factory were done. Countless loops. So many loops. And why? Well, let me answer that with a question of my own. Why would a YouTuber controlling one of the most dangerous characters in a universe as insane as Resident Evil fail to literally run through 2 correct doors and follow the path the game set out for him? Well, he's got a subhuman IQ and hadn't played Resident Evil 8 in 2 years. But where did this all start? Well, to understand the true extent of Hunk's journey through this hellhole, we'd first have to rewind the clock back to just after Hunk took down the fishy freak and just before he entered Heisenberg's factory. That sweet pocket of time when all seemed well in the village. But see, all was never well in this village, and in this line of work it never is. Yep, that's right, you've joined Hunk midway through a battle with a legitimate giant, a man of monumental proportions who would have to be taken out as per Hunk's mission details. This giant was pretty tough. After all, what's a hunk to a giant? It took a couple of tries, a lot of resources, and overall this would put Hunk in bad stead for his mission ahead. Entering the factory with barely any ammo, barely any heals, and barely enough willpower to fight through the horrors ahead, we fast forward through it, fighting off the man-made horrors well within our comprehension, and it leads us to something, nay, someone, worse than anything we'd seen Hunk face so far: Sturm. Sturm was a hybrid between man and machine, although at this point to call him anything other than a monstrosity would be a gross overstatement. Sturm would prove tough, especially with the minimal resources Hunk had at his disposal, but the bigger the fans are, the easier it is to pull the plug. That looked a lot better on the word page document. Anyhow, after a pretty short battle, Sturm was brought down, and little did Hunk know, his saving grace was only a few minutes away. The Hound Wolf squad, formed by the BSAA and led by a rogue Chris Redfield, were right on time. Chris would rendezvous with Hunk in a nearby garage and hand him something to help take out Heisenberg, while he and the rest of the team secured the local village and surrounding areas. It was here where Chris handed Hunk a new experimental HWS anti-personnel vehicle, the Claw. Hunk took the aptly named vehicle into what seemed to be an open arena. Convenient. Almost too convenient. At which point Heisenberg would appear ready to take Hunk out once and for all. The pair fought for a while, both fighters gaining and losing the upper hand over time, with the Claw dealing significant damage to the metal monstrosity, who had his sights set on the Grim Reaper. But in the end, after a well-placed missile shot to the head, Heisenberg would light up the sky with his death, signalling the start of the end for Mother Miranda and the evil that haunted this village. With the Four Lords gone for good, I think we should let Chris Redfield's report of the night's events see us out. His report from the night of the offensive on the village gives us a pretty cool look at what he saw as Hunk went after Mother Miranda before she was able to merge with the Mega Mycete. This concluded a 3-year hunt for Chris and the Hound Wolf squad, so I'll let him take it away in his own words.
February 10th, 2021. Me and the wolves had just entered the village when we heard fighting coming from a nearby factory. We hadn't heard anything from Hunk since he arrived, and the silence was starting to feel like a bad sign. For the first time, I thought maybe the Grim Reaper had finally met his match. We took out a few hostiles on the way into the village's center. Then I split off from the squad, went off the beaten track, and entered the factory alone. What I had found there, it was beyond anything I had seen before. Human-machine hybrids twisted into living weapons, built for total war. Even compared to the virus outbreak we stopped in San Francisco, or the Ouroboros incident, hell, even the Arklay Mountains. This was different. Those were deadly, sure, but this was individual cruelty on another level. By the time I fought my way through Carl Heisenberg's factory, I had finally found Hunk alive. I wouldn't say he was doing well, but he was breathing, and at that point that was enough. He told me 3 of the 4 lords were already dead, but he was running low on ammo. But more importantly, we were running out of time. Mother Miranda, the woman at the center of the whole nightmare, was preparing to fully merge with the Megamycete. If she succeeded, she'd have complete control over it, and that meant complete control over all of us. Hunk insisted he could handle Heisenberg by himself. Every instinct I had told me not to let him go alone, but against my better judgment, I trusted him, and gave him the weapon he needed. And thankfully, it was the right call. Heisenberg died outside of that factory. That means only one is left. Miranda. Scared, desperate, and more dangerous than ever. Alive enough to put her plan into motion. Not long after that, the Megamycete knocked out our comms, as Miranda's merger with the mold began. I lost track of Hunk after his fight with Heisenberg, but I had a pretty good idea where he'd gone. The problem was, if I was right, I didn't know what any of us could do to stop what was coming. The only evidence we had that Hunk was there was the absence of everything we had stored at our command center. Every round, every explosive, every piece of ordnance gone. He'd swept through and taken all of it. I'd like to say that I led the wolves in after him, but I did not. The village was overrun with creatures. Our extraction route window was closing, and we were trapped. Our survival came down to one man, the Grim Reaper. We never found out what exactly happened between Hunk and Miranda, but we know enough based on who walked out afterwards. Neither of them dead. The fight must have been brutal. Hunk took enough firepower in there to level a small country. We heard the gunfire, we heard the screaming, and I knew Hunk well enough to know he wasn't the kind of man who'd die quietly. If he went down, he made damn sure the enemy suffered for it. Truth is, I never learned exactly how it ended, and honestly, I stopped caring about the details. I gave him a chance to make up for the things he's done as a hired gun, and I think he did that 10 times over. But more than that, when I finally boarded that helicopter and detonated the charge we planted in the heart of the Megamycete, I thought about him. And I figured that maybe, just maybe, wherever Hunk ended up, dead or alive, he finally found some peace.
And that brings our time with Hunk to an end. Thank you all so much for watching. This is probably the most fun I've ever had showcasing a challenge run. I know it wasn't some like uber hard mental limit pushing extravaganza, but I thought this was really fun, and I hope you enjoyed the way it was presented, because it was quite interesting to do. I wanted to try something like unique with this, so if you didn't notice, each 4 of the lords and then Miranda's section at the end were actually presented in different styles. So the first one was a case file, Donna Beneviento was like a first person recount of Hunk's journey through her house, and the sleeve on my arm was just slip down, and then obviously you had Moreau, which I tried to make a bit funnier and a bit more self-deprecating, you know, a bit like Moreau does in the game. And then obviously Heisenberg's section was kind of, you know, we started in the middle, flipped back to the start, then it was a bit all over the place, and I thought that kind of fit for the mess that Heisenberg makes in this challenge run. So yeah, I do hope you enjoyed that, because it was really fun to write, and if you want to see more of this stuff, let me know, because, you know, I like telling stories, and if you can tell a story through a challenge run, then that's pretty cool. I also want to give a shout out this size of a shout out to MRJ7, who voiced Chris Redfield in the final report there. You might have noticed that wasn't my voice by the distinct lack of Britishness. That's because it was MRJ. So I'll leave all of his links in the description. Go and check him out. He makes some awesome stuff, and I can't thank him enough for this. He does challenge runs, he does voiceovers, he does a very good Arthur Morgan impression from Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption 2 to be specific. So yeah, go check him out, show him some love, because he makes some awesome stuff. And he was Chris Redfield, Roger Craig Smith's Chris Redfield specifically, in this video. So that's awesome. Anyway, that's all from me. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you next time for hopefully another strange challenge run. And goodbye. Stay safe out there.